Hey, ladies and gentlemen, it's your host Patrick. Before the episode starts, I just want to preface this by saying that during the episode, I discussed with Brent his recent musical called Con, the Musical, a Parody TREK-tacular, and basically at the time of recording, I hadn't listened to it, but as of now, I actually have listened to it, and let me say, it's a phenomenal musical, so I can highly recommend it. I'll have it all linked below, so check that out. And without any further ado, here's the episode with Brent Black, aka Brentalfloss. Hope you enjoy.
If you reject the conventional and embrace what's offbeat, guess what? It's time for Pillow Pete. 3 cheers! It's time for Pillow Pete. Fuck me! It's time for Pillow Pete.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of my podcast, Prattling with Pillow Pete. I have an incredible guest today. I've been a fan of his work since I was probably like 7 or 8 years old. And this is Brent Black, who a lot of you would probably more so know as Brentalfloss. Honestly, Brent, I'll let you take it away with introducing yourself. You could probably do it better than I can.
Oh, okay. Well, hi, I'm Brent Black, aka Brentalfloss. I've done a lot of stuff, podcasts, playwriting, musical theater writing, songwriting, YouTube, so that's kind of been my career. I think that's how I should have introduced myself. I didn't know. That was weirdly putting me on the spot, but it's like, okay, I can pitch me. But yeah, so that's...
My mistake.
No, not at all, not at all. That's the business card, I guess. But feel free to frame that in a way that you see it, just so it's not weirdly sounding like a flex or like a beginning of a speed date.
Oh, no. I think that's perfect. We'll just dive right into the questions then. I guess to start off, how long have you been making music and what kind of set you on that road?
So there was a movie called My Girl, starring Macaulay Culkin and a young woman whose career fizzled out, and I haven't thought of her name in probably 30 years. But it had the song by The Temptations, My Girl, in the trailer. And my sister had a little, like, octave-and-a-half toy piano. And out of nowhere, when I heard that trailer, at the age of 7 or 8, I went into my sister's room and started plunking out the hook of the song My Girl, like just one finger at a time. And I don't know why I did that. And I look back and I go like, maybe I would have just gravitated toward being a musician no matter what. Or maybe that was one of those chance moments that changes the entire trajectory of your life. But that was plunking out a thing with just my, one finger. My parents saw that I had an interest in it because I kept playing and learning different songs and teaching myself more or less. They got me a keyboard. I kept doing it. At the age of 11 or 12, I actually composed an original song. I used the Mario Paint Composer, which, if you don't know, listeners out there, is just like a little app within a Super Nintendo game that lets you use a computer mouse to compose on a rudimentary sheet music roll. But in the age of 8, 9, 10, that was a huge thing to be able to play with in the safety of a non-academic, non-lessons-based environment. So anyway, that was when I started to do music. Of course, there was a lot more evolution of it after that, but I would say it was like starting any kind of musicianship at 7 or 8, composing at 11 or 12, doing songwriting with lyrics properly at 13 or 14, and then kind of just off to the races after that.
Honestly, I think that's a perfect segue into the next question, since, of course, you mentioned Mario Paint. We're probably going to fast forward into, I think, what you're most known for, which is just adding lyrics to video game music. So I'm just curious how that came to be, if you really sat and thought about it, or one day you just woke up and you're like, I like this song in a video game. What if it had lyrics?
Yeah, okay, so I've had to think about this, because sometimes when something happens quickly, you're not writing down how it happened or thinking of it as a turning point. But I had always really liked the Mega Man 3 title screen from the NES Nintendo game Mega Man 3 from 1990. It's, to this day, I think just stands up to a lot of like much more famous instrumental tunes. I don't know why, but I just think it could have been Stairway in a different part of the multiverse. So there was that, and even though I was composing at the age of 12, I very quickly got into arranging, which for people that don't know really just means I'm not just composing the notes, I'm also adding drums and bass and, if it needs a xylophone, if it needs horns, and very rudimentary figuring that out, which then led to my ability to do that in the Brentalfloss videos, which you're talking about. And so there was that piece that I had already made an arrangement of Mega Man 3 in college, had already been songwriting, had already at that point gone through a very expensive 2-year grad program in musical theater writing with an emphasis in lyrics. And so I was teaching musical theater writing in a summer camp setting, and I taught 3 hours a day and sometimes had stuff to do outside of that, but I was in a small town living in a guest house. And I don't really know where the idea came from, other than to say I, started thinking, oh, this would be a fun thing to do, just to put lyrics to that song. And the first draft was just like kind of random stuff, not necessarily connected to Mega Man, like that he was a Yankees fan. And it's like, it got a little bit more Mega Man centric as I wrote it, but I just had bought my first MacBook Pro. It had iMovie, which I was like figuring out and really loving learning how to use. And so it all just came together very quickly. I recorded it on my built-in Mac microphone, had like a totally manic period of editing, basically what was my first music video, if I'm not mistaken, or one of the first. And yeah, so like that's it. It was certainly not an attempt to start a franchise. This was at a time before the word content creator. This was at a time before monetization of internet video was kind of an easy thing to do. It was just a thing to try. What made the difference was the amount of attention it got, and eventually, a little under 2 years later, how much money it started making. That kind of made it more of a career chapter than a hobby.
Interesting. And actually, like that last part, it's like a new question came to mind, like different from anything I sent over to you. With like making money off that, have you run into any troubles, like since you are using pre-existing songs, but like adding your own spin, or does like that fall under like some kind of like weird parody type law?
Weird parody is actually what it says on my business card. I ran into trouble before I was even monetizing with the song What a Wonderful World, because I made what would often be called a parody of What a Wonderful World, but the hook was Super Mario World, and I did it in a Louis Armstrong voice. And this was back when there was no... Like nowadays, a company can just say, hey, that's our song. We're going to like take half of your monetization on that video. So really, you're just making us money, but we're not going to shut you down. But at that time, it was like the old guard of, hey, that's ours. You can't have it. We're going to do a copyright strike. So like, yeah, I like in my little like rebuttal thing just said, you're being bullies. This isn't taking any food off your plate, But that was, I think, the only time. This guy named Pat the NES Punk and I did a Queen video called Nintendo Bohemian Rhapsody. And even though Brian May, the lead guitarist of Queen, retweeted it and loved it, the copyright owners of the song, the rights holders, did not and shut us down. But like, I would invite your audience, instead of doing a lecture, to look at the difference between parody and musical satire. A lot of things people think are parody are actually legally musical satire. And these days, a lot of the times, an artist who is being, somebody's using their music to do something like that is typically just, that doesn't want to go to the trouble of suing or cease and desisting, because it ultimately is something of a brand enhancement, unless it's making fun of the artist, in which case it's fully legal as parody. So, yeah, and I mean, we can touch more on that later when we potentially talk about a stage project that I have recently worked on a lot that actually did in fact have a pretty clear cease and desist from major corporate rights holders.
Admittedly, I don't mind jumping around with the questions that I sent over, so if you want to just dive into that, I'm more than happy.
Sure. It's going to be your job to remind me we're talking about a cease and desist, because now I have to establish some exposition for your audience. In 2015, I had the idea to write a parody musical based on Star Trek, specifically Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, that movie, and elements of the TV show Star Trek The Next Generation. And just like when Captain Kirk yells the name Khan in the movie, the musical is called Khan, the Musical. A parody TREK-tacular. And I started developing it in 2015, finished this first draft in 2019, and developed it with like 6 different readings, and it was off-Broadway. It had an off-Broadway engagement in New York City in 2023. Well, that was a very monetized production. And after that, I received, through the producers, a cease and desist from Paramount that was like, they were trying to seem magnanimous. They were like, of course we appreciate fan works and are honored by the many fans that blah, blah, blah. But essentially they were saying, don't ever do this again, and certainly don't monetize it, because it could lead to consumer confusion, and you have 10 days to respond before we move forward with legal blah, blah, blah. So, even though the off-Broadway show, let us just say, I didn't make as much on an off-Broadway run as somebody that lives outside New York would think that means. And I suddenly was like, well, this is it. I know that my show does not infringe on copyright. I know enough about parody, and it's one thing if a YouTube video gets taken off, but it's another thing if a musical you've been working on for, at that point, 8 years, can't happen. So I was ready to fight for it. I found a lawyer who had done this very thing for another musical with, against a rights holder. I found out that the writers of musicals had won multiple such cases against entities such as the Dr. Seuss estate, the rights holders of the show Three's Company, the rights holders of the movie version of Grease. And so I was well positioned just by precedent, but I also knew all the reasons that it was legally a parody. I sent those to that lawyer. He drew up a 5-page FU. And also, I thought I could write this. It just wouldn't sound lawyerly enough, and now I'm going to spend $3,500 freaking dollars to, yeah. But I looked at it and went, this show could make me $1 million. This show could make me $10 million. If I have to if I have to put $3,500 on the credit card now to protect a thing, I mean, it's like if somebody's roof caves in and they have to pay $3,500, well, they don't think about it. That just has to happen. And this is like that. This is like my water heater went out. Sorry, this is just how it's got to be. So one thing that he pointed out that I didn't see, which is almost worth all the money, is he went, did you notice they didn't allege infringement? They said, don't do it again, it might lead to consumer confusion. But also, they don't have a stage musical. So they're just blowing smoke. They're trying to get their money's worth out of their house legal, their house attorney, or one of them on the big legal team. And So basically, they backed off. Now, they didn't give consent, but like they didn't give approval, I think it's the term I should use. But the show has, in the time since, had monetized productions in Fort Worth and Buffalo, New York, and next year there will be productions that are contractually signed, and some of them are currently have been announced, but productions in the Sydney area of Australia, as well as the greater Detroit area of Michigan, the greater Nashville area of Tennessee, and the smack middle of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. So the fact that Paramount hasn't, like, what do you call it, filed an injunction or a stop or a whatever, they understand that this is not going to be a fruitful road for them to go down. They tried to be bullies and tried to scare me, but like, I know enough to know that perhaps there are some songs I've done in the past that if I had to go to court over whether they are legally parody or something else, I might be on more shaky ground, and I could be willing to let those go and just say, this is done. I'll take it off the internet or whatever. But with Khan, I knew enough to know that I would win a case, but the thing is that the flip side of the fact that some of those copyright holders of those musicals or entities I talked about earlier, just because they lost in court doesn't mean they didn't drag the writers of those musicals through years of legal fees and court proceedings, and the whole time they weren't able to put on the show. Yeah. The show's already taken, in my opinion, way longer than it needed to come to the fruition it has. Part of that was pandemic lockdown, kind of paused theater for 2 years. And also part of it's that developing a musical simply takes time. Even if you have all the money in the world and are a celebrated musical theater writer, you'd be lucky to get your show on Broadway in 4 years. It's more like 5, 6, 7, 8 often. Even for like writers that, again, millionaires or people that have been successful in the past, finding, it moves very slowly. So anyway, yeah, I think that answers the thing I brought up, which was about the cease and desist. But they backed off, and in my opinion, they have all but said, yeah, go ahead, and silently eaten the crow there.
Well, I mean, obviously it sucks you even had to go through any of that, but that's good to hear that you came out on top. I'm not super familiar with Star Trek, but even just hearing like the amount of behind the scenes stuff there, it's like I feel more inclined to actually sit down and listen to this musical, and who knows, maybe I'll become a Star Trek fan.
That honestly, an animator I know the other day put a comment on our Instagram saying, I wasn't a Trekkie a week ago and I listened to the album and now I had to go and watch all the movies. The thing is, like, if somebody's not a musical theater fan at all and they don't know the Wrath of Khan plot, then the only thing that they'll really have to latch onto is the suggestion of a story. You know how a musical theater album's not going to tell you the whole story because you don't have the spoken part. The ostensibly good music, and the fact that, like, I don't know if you are old enough to remember Animaniacs, but I think that a lot of us have experienced a thing where we're watching a kid's TV show and you somehow can tell they're making references to something that you don't know what the references are, but you can tell that it would be really funny if you did get the reference. And somehow that's enough to feel like you're in on something or you're having fun. I think that with Khan, even if somebody doesn't know Star Trek and isn't really a musical theater fan, I think that there's still something to get out of it. If it, especially if they happen to be, aside from not being those two things, if they happen to be a Brentalfloss fan, then, that will be, that could be a way in, because they'll sort of know that style. But I would invite anybody to just, like, take a listen. It's on Spotify, Apple, Amazon, Deezer, Tidal, If you have a music streaming app you like, it's probably on there.
Gotcha. And I love, like, the way you put that because, yeah, I love Animaniacs. I mean, I'm only 25, but Everything you described there, I love it when a thing has like just extra layers to it. So I mean, I love The Simpsons, for example, and even now there's so many jokes where I'm like, I might not get what political thing they're referencing from like the 90s, but I know it's funny, and sometimes it will lead me to dig deeper.
Yeah.
And I actually prefer things to be that way than just like some obvious joke where it's like, well, anyone could have written this.
Yeah, yeah. The show tries to be a balance of like, the first draft was very in-jokey. And I realized like, oh, this is like, this would only work at like conventions or like as a video for huge Trekkies. And it's like, can I find a way to make it a show that is really fun for anyone and happens to have more goodies if you are primed to get all the references? And I think about the show Wicked. You will enjoy Wicked in a certain way if you have familiarized yourself with The Wizard of Oz and read the book Wicked, on which the musical is based. However, the show sets its characters up. There's this woman. She's green. She has powers. She wears this hat. Here's this woman. She's blonde. Like, it explains what you're seeing. And even if you don't understand that it's setting up and adding to the context of something that exists already, you have a good enough time and see the story it's trying to tell. And so I set out to do that. And in a mere 10 years, I think I've finally perfected and frozen it as best as it's going to get.
And honestly, I think I probably know the answer to this next question. But after hearing you talk about this musical, like, would you say this is probably like your most proud work, like in your career, or is there anything that would top this?
I think that it's the best thing I've ever done, even though it is not exactly like. I mean, it is a slight departure in some ways from stuff I've done in the past, but it's almost like the combination of so many different things. It's not parody the way Brentalfloss is, but it's also not musical theater like my other musicals I've written were. I mean, it is a little bit, but like it's a combination of what if I did a musical. A great example of that is like the Book of Mormon. The South Park guys wrote the Book of Mormon, but it doesn't feel like a South Park musical through and through. If you didn't know they were involved, you might think this is kind of like South Park, but they didn't make a South Park episode, even though they did use some of the talent and skills and even style of South Park. Same deal. There's crossover between my YouTube work and Con, but I think that it's the best thing I've ever done, partially because I tinkered with it so long. It's substantial. It's 2 hours. It's not just a quick little video. And it combined different things I'm able to do in a way that I think transcended and like leveled up from what I had done before. To say nothing bad necessarily about stuff from before, but yeah, I think proudest, weirdly, is a term that's hard for me to sign on to, but I think it's the best thing I've done.
Yeah. That's fair. And of course, like with that discussion, you've mentioned Brentalfloss, so I'll go ahead and kind of rewind.
Sure.
My apologies to the audience. Honestly, I think we're going to be jumping around a lot in this conversation. But with like your Brentalfloss work, like, do you have any favorites from those? Like as a fan, I love obviously like the Moon theme from DuckTales, and I mean, as you mentioned earlier, Mega Man 3. It's like hell, I love all of the Mega Man songs that you've added lyrics to.
Well, this one to me is like there's a lot of things going on with this question. There's the fact that some of this stuff has aged more poorly than other stuff, and it's hard for me to like think of that as a favorite. Like, I really like my Mario Sunshine video, but in 2014 it was only a little bit edgy to do a Japanese accent when imitating Miyamoto. And it really aged poorly. And at the time I was like, look, the guy's got a thick Japanese accent. I'm just talking the way that he would. But we know why that ages poorly and can seem like a cartoonifying or dehumanizing of a person. So even though there's so much I love about that video and the edit, I can't say that one. I will say the BioShock song's a favorite. More recently, Mega Man 3 ending credits with lyrics and Luigi's Mansion 3. Really a lot of stuff I did in 2020 in my little, like, what I called season 12 cheekily, because there had been no seasons before that. But like, yeah. But as far as older stuff, certainly the BioShock song, Ballad of the Mages, the other BioShock song. I think there's something kind of uniquely absurdist and funny about my Wii Shop channel.
Yeah.
But, you know, I mean, it's tough to pick favorites, and every now and then I'll go back and listen to the old stuff and go, wow, this was really good. And I never think about it because I started doing this 17 and a half years ago.
That's totally fair. And I will say, since you touched upon, some of the older songs that you've done, maybe not aging the best, I I was listening to a lot of your songs like before we hopped on this call, and one of them I forgot was making me laugh so hard because of just how goofy it was. It was The Truth About Toad.
Oh boy. Yeah.
I mean, I'm not gonna sit here and dwell on it, but I don't know. It was very catchy and definitely was making me laugh for better or for worse. Anyway, though, since of course you mentioned, you've been doing that for like 17 years with like the Brentalfloss stuff. I'm kind of curious to hear your take on like starting off on YouTube and even platforms before YouTube and kind of seeing it grow over time, like especially compared to now, because even though again I'm only 25, I used YouTube a little bit growing up, and I can see the differences now. And like even at my age, I liked how a lot of it used to be. So I'm kind of curious to hear like your take on it after working so long.
Yeah, I mean, I will say it's worth noting that I was never really paying really super close attention to the algorithm. There are people that have I would say there are people with like mediocre content who figure out exactly how to game the algorithm, and they follow the way the algorithm and the structure of YouTube changes, and they can get a lot of views because they figured out kind of how to game the system, and that's fine. But I always had more of like a if I build it they will come kind of attitude, which has like been good, but also sometimes I've gotten in my way in my career by having it if I build it they will come, because it's it's a little bit isolationist, and a little bit more networking and collaboration might have helped. But as far as how YouTube's changed, yeah, I mean, when I first started YouTube, there were like people in their basements with, like their cameras were shooting at 144p at like 20 frames a second, and they were just vlogging about their day or talking about weird stuff. And it was this new world of the ability to broadcast yourself to an essentially unlimited percentage of the human race. It felt like, anyway. And so I wasn't the first wave, but I would say I was like kind of second wave. Like once like the Angry Video Game Nerd and Zipster and What the Buck and like certain other things had like established, oh, you can kind of go viral. You can get Smosh, for instance. And I kind of jumped on the right after that point. And if I'd waited even a year or two later, I think I wouldn't have gotten on the map in the same way, because it was just still so new. And, like I got burnt out and kind of like mostly stepped away from it starting around 2015, 2016. So the time between 2016 and when I actually started regularly making YouTube content again in 2020 was probably the biggest leap ahead in how YouTube changed. And unfortunately, it's gone from something where, well, in short, it's become a business, and it's become kind of factory work. You have to keep eyeballs on your work longer. You have to typically do sponsorships. There is less money per view. And it's much more the kind of thing that you can game. Now they have like YouTube promotion for pay. So you pay for more recommendations and more views, which is like, okay, it's just kind of it has become, like I say, kind of a factory job. I still put stuff on it. In fact, I've started dipping a toe back into that lately as my, kind of big time sink projects of the last couple of years have started to let up and started to be basically over or mostly over. And I just can't think of it as a way to directly make money, because you have to commit to it in this way that's almost definitely going to burn you out, because it just gets harder. It's more work to make less money. And that has been the case every year, in my estimation, with YouTube. Really, since about 2015, or maybe a little bit earlier. Just incrementally changing the algorithm to more benefit the people at the top, shocker, and make it harder for the actual content creators to get something off the ground and have it actually make money. There are so many people that put so much work into YouTube over so many years, hundreds of thousands of hours of content, or maybe thousands anyway. But the point being, they just get burnt out, and that's the only gig they ever had. And it's like, you don't have any security in YouTube, and they keep making it where your residual views make less and less money because of, them changing the algorithm to benefit recency, and to, recency getting more ad money as well. So I'm not saying it's gone totally to shit, but it's really a much less friendly place for creators than it used to be. And I think that's a shame.
It definitely is. And honestly, I do some stuff on YouTube, but I wish I could be doing more. But as somebody who probably watches more than I upload, I can really feel it, because anytime there's new people coming onto the scene who, even if they get popular, I look at them and I'm like, they feel manufactured. It doesn't feel like anyone has a real passion. And it's that's why you and your work, and also similar other YouTubers like you mentioned, Angry Video Game Nerd, like James Rolfe, Doug Walker, and just dudes like you who, honestly, in my mind, really kind of built a platform in the sense. I don't want to put too much on you, if I don't know how that makes you feel hearing something like that, but I don't know. I kind of just miss some of that older feel of it, where it felt more passionate from people. But
well,
anyway,
I will say, not to burst that bubble, but one thing that really helps a YouTube creator is creating the illusion that what they're making is something they're passionate about. At a certain point, you do reach a moment where you go, because geez, for me, I barely played any video games anymore when I started making Brentalfloss stuff. I played a PC game here and there. I didn't have a Wii. I didn't have a GameCube. And it's almost like my love of video game music from my, long ago youth. It's like the hand that pops out of the graveyard dirt, to come back and be like, no, you will have me in your life again. But I know for a fact that, James Rolfe, I don't think I'm telling tales out of school. Is the man passionate about playing every shitty game to the point where it makes him mad? Is that his dream? Well, probably not as much as the dream of making films, making fun video content, and at this point, providing for his family and paying off his mortgage. And that's not to say people aren't passionate about what they do, but sometimes you have to find the fun in something that kind of becomes a job. And when playing a video game becomes a job and you're taking notes during it, it's not, I guess I'm just saying the illusion of passion can be something that improves video content. But at some point, most people making video content, if they're gaining traction and they're uploading regularly, it's going to become something of a formula or a process, or they're going to need help. They're going to need ghostwriters. They're going to need an editor. They're going to need something. And sometimes that makes it more of a factory farm. You look at what's-her-face, Illuminati, whose early stuff I liked. And then it slowly became clear you don't have any idea what you're talking about. I don't even know if you write this stuff anymore. You don't know how the things are pronounced in these documentary videos you're making. You don't know how the names of the people you're talking about are pronounced. I think you're just doing voiceover for video after video that a team is putting together for you. And it's slop. And like, she really kind of got like, she just made some mistakes that got her drummed out of people's good graces. So I'm not worried about like a little bit casting that, aspersion on her. But that was one of the first times I just went, man, this is really like, there's something really ugly about the shelf-stable mass production of slop. And of course, with the dawn of generative AI, it's gotten even worse. I'm just trying to make stuff. Yeah, I'm just trying to make stuff that AI wouldn't think of. And I'd like to think if I just keep having my weird brain and having takes and having combinations and juxtapositions of things that are unusual and not intuitive and not obvious, that I could hopefully stay ahead of the AI slop tidal wave. But we'll see.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Like I despise generative AI, so I could go on that rant forever, but I won't. I don't want to bore you or the audience. But I am curious, like for like the human touch of things. Whenever you do like Brentalfloss videos for adding lyrics to video game songs and stuff like that, like can you just kind of go into the process of that?
I mean,
like
it's different every time, but I would say on the bell curve, it's most usually me starting with the decision to either do a lyric from a specific game or do a lyric for a specific tune. And once that's the case, it's like, now sometimes I do that in the middle of playing a game. I'll go, oh shit, this really should be a lyric one day. And sometimes I don't actually get to it for years, but sometimes I go, I love this Shovel Knight game that just came out. I feel like I really want to make something with this. I'm going to just do it. But like, even then, there's often the process of taking notes, writing down a bunch of little observations. Sometimes it can be pages and pages and pages and pages and pages of stuff, and then just kind of going in. And a lot of times I'll write what's called a dummy lyric, which is just a lyric that scans the way that the song scans, so that I can look at it and be able to compare what I'm writing lyrically to the scan of that. Because even though I occasionally break this rule, I don't really like when things scan against how they're pronounced. Which, if that doesn't make sense, it's kind of like, okay, a good example is like Miley Cyrus's song Wrecking Ball. There's this phrase where she goes, never asking why. And that's not how we say that. We say, never asking why, or never asking why, but going, never asking why. Now, for a pop song, that was fine. Sure, do your thing. Nobody cares about the lyrics halfway in a pop song anyway, especially the verse. But that's not my style, and I also think part of that's because the stuff I write needs to be comprehended the first time you hear it, which is a very musical theater thing, and it's also a very comedy song thing. If a comedy song is garbled and you can't hear the jokes, it's not a comedy song. So, how did we get on to scan?
I was just asking your process of like how.
Oh yeah. So, it's trying to synthesize the notes into a lyric that I'm comparing to a dummy lyric, so I'm making sure it scans right. But a lot of times it's like, I can't really figure out the lyric until I attach a hook. there's not always got to be an overarching concept, but if you can figure out, okay, a good example is like my Spectre Night, which is my second Shovel Knight video. There was this clear part of the music that's a chorus, structurally, and it goes da 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 da. And when I realized that that could be on a very scary night, and then I could connect that to, oh, and the person you're fighting is a knight with a K, and he's very scary because he's like an undead scary guy. So it's like, oh, he's a very scary night, and it's on a very scary night, and now I have a concept. Or, you know, finding a place, for instance, where the name of the game fits into a phrase in the melody. A good or a name of something, like, for instance, I did the Transylvania level from the DuckTales game, and the hook of that song arguably comes at the beginning of the verse, and it's bow 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 now now, and it is the syllables of Transylvania. Transylvania. And like without that, I might not have written that lyric. So it's like you got to find, you know, it's like a crossword puzzle. This is like my metaphor for almost all creative works. If you can fill out one of the words of the crossword puzzle correctly, that will lead to you, it'll help you figure out another word. And then from that, it'll help you figure out another word, and it all connects together. Unlike a crossword puzzle, I mean, you know, anyway, I don't want to go too deep into that because the metaphor can fall apart, but there's a million ways to get in there. You can start with any word. Now, sometimes you realize, oh, that was the wrong word, and that made me connect it to another, you know, wrong word. Now that I have that one right, I can go back and fix the other one. But you need a way in. And so, okay, now I've got the lyric. Somewhere in there I had to get the arrangement. And often I will find somebody's MIDI arrangement that they made on Web 1.0 many years ago. Sometimes I make my own arrangement. I had to do my own arrangement of the Wii Shop channel, which is in a musical harmonic language I never work in. Just the weird jazz of that song. It's very catchy, but it's harmonically very strange. But yeah, now we're talking go into the studio, record some lyrics, record some takes, edit those together. Now start editing the video, for which I may have needed to capture a lot of footage. I'm not ashamed to say sometimes I've taken people's Let's Plays. There was a time people were like, you stole footage! And it's like, yeah, but if you just made this like video of yourself playing this game and I'm not using your voice, it's gonna be okay, bro. Like, people were mad at Anita Sarkeesian for doing that, and it's like, it's really, the only real worry is if they have their, if they have their watermark on it. I don't think of that as like stealing their labor. But yeah, sometimes you got to get a lot of footage. I'm currently working on a video that, like, I have a capture card like connected to the console. So as I'm editing, if I'm like, oh, I didn't get a shot that correlated to that particular lyric, I'd have to go and like play the game, record it, capture it, airdrop it to my other computer, you know. And often, once I've got the edit, once I've got the vocals comped, I realize I want to do different takes, clean up takes on the vocals. I want to rewrite the lyrics a little bit, maybe to match something I found in the video edit. And it kind of is like the video edit changes, slightly update the lyrics, slightly update the vocal editing, and it kind of all comes together. It's a very layered process, and I think, you know, when I'll make a video like months after a game comes out, people go, kind of a late pass. And it's like, yeah, because there's not a Henry Ford fucking assembly line of this. It's all me. And maybe that in itself is a mistake. But once you establish a style, then working with somebody else is almost never going to quite feel like that style. So it's a thing I've had to contend with, but it's worth it for me to step back. And even if there's something factually wrong in the video or a note that I go, oh, I sung that wrong, or oh, I wish I'd changed that, it's still all me, and I can stand by it and go, yeah, these are all choices I made. And that feels good. And I hope that artists' desire to continue to feel that will hold off a revolution where so many things are made automatically with AI.
Yeah. No, and that is cool. And I find it funny too that like for your Brentalfloss work, the fact that anyone would be like, "Oh, like this is kind of late." You from the start you've been adding lyrics to like, like the DuckTales games and Mega Man. It's like those were already old by the time you were doing it. So it's like
Yeah.
that's funny.
Well, it's weirdly like if I do a thing a few months after a video game came out, they'll say it's a late pass. If it's from 20 years ago, as you say, it's like, oh, nostalgia. I don't know.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
weird. People just don't understand. There's just so many people that like aren't thinking about the practicalities of making this kind of content. And of course they aren't, because it's a very specific, specialized, terrible journey to take on. Not terrible, but definitely a multi-layered and full of pitfalls, we'll say.
Yeah. Pitfall was a good game. Anyway, yeah, like kind of going back because you mentioned the DuckTales Transylvania uh, like lyric video that you put out recently. I'm curious, like since that only came out like what, like not even a month ago, I think. Like, do you plan on continuing to like do Brentalfloss stuff like for the foreseeable future, or?
Well, so as it happens, I started in July or maybe August doing short form Brentalfloss content where I, instead of doing an entire tune from a game, I just take very short jingles, 5 and 10-second jingles. Like, often they are jingles for success moments, or jingles for game over, or jingles for you died, or you got a moon in this game, you got a star, you got an item. And I did that with Mario, and then I tried it with Sonic, and I did it with Mario again. And I did some other kind of like experimental short form stuff. And even though view counts are different for shorts than for regular videos, they did get a lot of views. And like, I got invited to perform at a convention for the first time in a long time. So that kind of led me to think, okay, I should, now that I'm not working on the album of Con the Musical because it's done, now that I'm not working every day on Use Your Words 2, my second video game project, because my particular part of the creation of it is done, I have the time. I'm not really sure what to do with that time, but cynically, if I can make new Brentalfloss content that makes the old Brentalfloss fans happy, that can open the door for me to sneak in marketing for the game and the musical. And if people have been satisfied with recent Brentalfloss content, they won't say, hey, what have you done for me lately? Hey, get back to what you're good at. They'll be more happy to check it out. And because of the YouTube algorithm, if I've recently had a video more people watched, it will be recommended. The Star Trek video or the Use Your Words video will be more recommended to my viewers, and I can even start having videos of my own that are de facto sponsored by my other thing I've done. So there's a cynicism to it, but also I'm really enjoying that people who grew up with my work are now adults, and I am now an object of nostalgia and almost like comfort watching for people. I didn't see that coming, but it's kind of cool. So do I plan to keep doing it? Honestly, I don't have a plan. I have an idea for a video, another with lyrics video. I have a post-it of like 10 with lyrics ideas. If I just wanted to say, okay, I'm going to go back to the life where I have a Patreon, I release a music video every 2 to 4 weeks, and some content outside that, and I'm going to have a Patreon for every major video. I could jump back into that life, and I could get that machine going, and probably within a year, that could comprise a full-time gig again. But I don't know if I want to do that. because I don't want to necessarily get back to the point where I'm getting burnt out and it's not fun. I'm having creative fun for the first time in a long time. It's not getting me out of debt very fast, but it's still kind of what I signed up for to be an artist. I didn't really sign up for the, the kind of like, some people can get so burnt out that it may as well be a 60-hour-a-week desk job, but they don't even have a salary or benefits or a 401k. I'm trying to avoid that and still have enough food on the table from previous projects and marketing the things that I have recently done. For instance, getting productions of Con licensed around the country so that I can take advantage of those and not have to go right back to the desk job like 60-hour-a-week grind that 2023 and 4 and some of 5 have been.
Gotcha. No, and I think it's cool, like, hearing that you're happy, like, doing the work that you're doing now. And certainly, too, also, a little bit ago, you mentioned that, people who grew up with you, pointing at me, like, your work is just kind of comforting. It is, like, for me, like, I can't speak for anyone else, but it's, like, you and, like, honestly, other similar YouTubers from, like, the time that you kind of jumped in. To me, it's like you all feel like just kind of like the cool uncles to like go to. Like, I would say that to make you sound like make you feel old or anything. It's
No.
Genuinely.
I'm 41. I think it's time for me to accept being an uncle. I actually recently, not to totally detour you, but I talked about New Balance shoes and how I like them, but how when I grew up, they were like the shoes for dads. And this guy was like, just because you have kids doesn't mean that you aren't fully in the dad genre, You are a bald, dad-botted 41-year-old. Like, you are not escaping the genre of these shoes that you categorized in your youth. And I was like, oh my God, I am the dad wearing New Balance shoes. How did this happen? But yes, it did. And to be that uncle, and sometimes I have been someone to give advice or to just try to connect with people in ways that can mimic that sort of thing. It's been nice. It's a little weird, but you really wonder where the time goes. But if I've earned a place in people's hearts and minds as part of their life in this way, well, how lucky is that for me, Can't really complain about that.
That's cool. And then, for the sake of time, I think this last question is probably where I'll try to end it. But you did mention at least like one of the games that you've made, Use Your Words 2. As I told you before we recorded, I unfortunately haven't had time to try either of them out, so I apologize. But I am still curious.
Dare you?
I know. Damn it.
Yeah.
I tried to be better. No, I'm just kind of curious to hear a little bit about like the production of that and just really anything about it, because I find it fascinating that like you do music, you make games, like you do a lot from everything I can tell. So
well, as long as I never have to do the same thing for very long, I'll just upend my career over and over again. I've made 2 games, or I've co-created and worked collaboratively on 2 games that were ultimately me working as head writer and designer. So the first one, basically, I mean, your listeners may have heard of a series of games called the Jackbox Party Pack. And if they don't know, you play this game on a console or a PC, which is connected to the internet. And then with your phones, you can also do with tablets, but typically with your phone, you go to a website that acts like an app. And you can play the game using your phone as the input device. And growing up, I loved sort of fill-in-the-blank type games. Balderdash. There was a short-lived DVD-based game called Quip It. And obviously Cards Against Humanity. And so when I saw Jackbox, I was actually like stuck because of a snowstorm at this convention called MagFest. And I had to like stay an extra night. And a bunch of us that were just like, our buses and planes and trains had been canceled. We all just like were huddled into one hotel room, and they were like, you want to play Jackbox? I had never played it. Once I realized that you could make a game with this technology, I thought, oh my God. a combination of every game I enjoyed playing growing up is now possible. So a game kind of loosely based on the concepts of Quip It and Balderdash and Cards Against Humanity, but like not quite like any of them, came together in my head. Slowly, it was like 2 months later, it was the eureka moment, and talked to a friend of mine, Julian Spillane, who is a veteran video game developer. And over the course of 2 years, we developed it. We kickstarted it, very much changed it as we went. That's usually kind of my style. I don't think that it's a good idea to lay out a plan and then slavishly adhere to it if it's something that's supposed to be fun and funny. Because if it doesn't work, it doesn't matter that you had a plan. You're fulfilling a plan that doesn't work. But it came out in 2017. I always wanted to make a sequel. It took a while because of various setbacks, but we released Use Your Words 2 on PC and Mac last December. It is now also on Xbox and PlayStation, and it will be on Nintendo consoles in probably, once you release this, in no more than a week. It'll be December 18th. Will finally be on all consoles from Xbox One forward, from the Switch forward, from PlayStation 4 forward, plus PC and Mac via Steam. So yeah, it's the first one was a labor of love. The second one was a labor of labor, but they're very fun, and you can play them I think they're best played in a room together. I also understand there's so many people in this world that don't have IRL friends. It's crazy when they tell me that, because I'm of a generation and a type of person that it's just like, what do you mean? But I've seen that comment enough times to go, oh, you're not exaggerating. You have no IRL friends. But you can also do it with like a Zoom screen share. You can stream it on Twitch. Sorry to sound like a commercial, but like basically that's how it works.
Gotcha. No, that's cool. And yeah, I love a lot of the Jackbox party games. So honestly, I'll probably check it out, especially because I mainly stick with Nintendo. So once it comes out, I think your sales pitch worked on me.
Thanks. Well, the whole idea is like, it's sort of, I always have a snarky comment for everything. I always have like, I want to take a picture of something and then put a caption on it. So it's sort of that idea. It's called Use Your Words, because the idea is that, you write a subtitle that's going to show in a movie clip. The movie's not in English. So it's going to look like they were saying whatever you typed. Or you're going to write a headline for a newspaper, like a picture in the newspaper. You're going to write a fill in the blank. You're going to play a Family Feud style game, but it's like, name a place you shouldn't roller skate, or whatever. And people vote for your answer anonymously, and you get points, and then you find out who wrote what verbally if you want to, but you can also write anonymously. So if nobody votes for yours, nobody will find out the terrible going to hell thing that you wrote. And Use Your Words 2 just sort of doubled the number of mini games in it, and substantially added to the amount of content, added some more features. But that's the basic idea. So for smartasses, we call it the party game for funny people and their unfunny friends, because it's balanced to make it where you don't have to feel like you're a funny person. Usually people understand it and jump in pretty quickly, but the kind of people that are going to buy it usually are the kind of people that enjoy Jackbox type games and enjoy being smartasses and coming up with jokes and punchlines and laughing with their friends.
Genuinely, like, that actually does sound like me, so I think I probably will try to check it out eventually.
Great.
On that note, though, by any chance, is there anything else that you wanted to quickly cover, or do you think that's a good ending spot?
The thing I just want to, I don't know how many theater people you have listening, but a thing that I want to take advantage of this platform to say is that I've written a musical, and musicals don't produce themselves. If a Star Trek parody musical is something that even halfway you or someone in the theater community or the drama teacher community would be interested in producing, It's just a matter of renting the rights at competitive rates. It's a very, 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 very good show, and I can only say that because after 10 years of development, it's a pizza show. Even when it's not very good, it's still pretty good. So I'd love if you'd look into it or at least listen to the album, and you can find all of that at Khan. That's KHAN, themusical.com.
Gotcha. Yeah, definitely. I do plan to check it out hopefully soon. And definitely, like, once this goes live, I'll be sure to have plenty of links to it. This way people can
Great.
very easily find it. But yeah, before we go, I just want to thank you so much for spending an hour of your time with me, Brent. It's been very, very fun talking with you. Honestly, I wish we had a little more time. I could probably talk to you for a while. This has been far better than I could have ever expected. So I just want to thank you for that.
Yeah, it's been fun. Thank you.
No problem.
I am also known as the Blue Bomber. I could shoot the legs off Jeffrey Dahmer. A robot fish, kill a robot frog, and then I ride off on my robot dog.